Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. The internet. This is Rock and Roll Spot coming at you with this week's weekly TV roundup. We're going to start off with this past Friday's episode of Constantine. The episode begins in Chicago. A woman going through an old the headquarters of an old record label finds some rather disturbing symbology, including some what appear to be sacrificed animals, while looking for a rare record. She then takes it to a producer friend of hers to authenticate it on a spectrograph, and it tells him not to listen to it, but eventually he gives in and seemingly and dies in a very bloody manner. Now, back down to Atlanta, Zed from the previous week's episode shows up at the cabin while John is learning a new spell in a rather interesting manner. Chaz gives Zed as he refers to it, the penny tour of the cabin, and it appears to be that the cabin is, well, bigger on the inside. John and Zed go to. Sorry about that. John reveals that the dead producer is an old friend, and in fact, as we find out later, produced the one album of the punk band that John was briefly in. He even flat out says the only reason he was in it, that the guys were in the band were a bunch of wankers looking to get laid. But he also intimates that Bernie, the producer, would not take his own life. So as Chaz's cab is still out of service, Zed and John head to Chicago to investigate. Upon arriving in Chicago, John and Zed break into the morgue where Bernie's body is at, thanks to Zed's pickpocketing skills. And then they try to have a chat with Bernie, courtesy of a Hand of Glory. They get a few leads, which Zed is able to make a decent amount of sense of, thanks to, well, Google. First, completely showing John up on that. So they end up going to talk to the former owner of a blues label, which would more likely based out of the building from the beginning of the episode. And they learn the backstory of the record just before the man dies. The backstory being that a blues performer who supposedly vanished in the 30s did the whole selling his soul for success, and while recording an album, well, devil came for his due, and the devil's voice was actually recorded on the CD, or on the, I can't believe I said it was actually recorded on the record, making it quite the item. Doing some more research, John and Zed then break into the home of another of Bernie's clients, a heavy metal musician, and they learn that the record was acquired as a means of breaking a deal that the musician's wife made to save him from cancer. However, it turns out that the broker of the deal only wants the record to give to Papa Midnight. John ends up being taken by Midnight and left to die in a admittedly rather messed up manner, while Midnight goes to claim the record, seeing it as a potential get out of hell free card. Midnight's thugs go to the musician's home and appropriate the record, and eventually fall victim to it, before taking it to a club and playing it, leading to basically a massacre. Zed and Chaz, having taken a red-eye flight from Atlanta, figure out the next place the record will be played at, which is a radio station. John, Zed, and Chaz arrive to stop the two thugs, but are a little late. While Zed and Chaz do what they can to stop the signal from going, John goes in the station, as there's one pair of earphones between the three of them, and tries to turn the record itself off. Chaz ends up driving a car through the building's part of their maintenance shed and basically screw up the power. And John, with an assist from Papa Midnight, manages to stop the record and then, on his own, send it and the two thugs to hell. In the end of the episode, John manages to get a hold of the Soul Broker who made the deal in the first place, gets him to end the contract by actually having him eat it. This, of course, gives the wife of the performer the thought that maybe he'll develop cancer again, redevelop cancer, and however, he says, nowadays there's a lot more options, and he's got a lot more to live for. And then finally we see that Papa Midnight has made an effigy of John, which he then sets on fire. That's probably going to be leading to some interesting plot points later down the road. Another thing of note in the episode is that John uses at one point a playing card, which is imbued with the ability to show the person looking at it whatever it is that they need to see. So basically, the cabin that John and Chaz operate out of is a TARDIS that is stationary, and he has psychic paper. At least for most of the episode he does. Anyways, moving on to Arrow. Last week's episode of Arrow. It opens with a training montage. Ollie beating on Roy. Apparently Roy hasn't been sleeping too well lately. Laurel training with Ted Grant, and Ted kind of taunts her, but by the fact that she's just not that great. And Thea sparring with Merlin. That one actually seemed to be more of an equal footing bit. Oh, and finally, Felicity does crunches just before Ray Palmer, her boss, shows up. And then her mother shows up as well. Flashback, Felicity in college. Her boyfriend tries to wipe out all student loans, but she stops him. This apparently happened 5 years ago, so Felicity was in her senior year of college during the same time that Ollie was apparently in Hong Kong. Back in the present, Thea shows Ollie her new place, which is paid for with Malcolm Merlin's money. Then, after they have an argument about where the money for the new apartment is coming from, all the power in Starling is knocked out by a group calling itself Brother Eye. That's Brother Eye. Team Arrow looks into Brother Eye, who promises to next wipe out all the bank accounts. Laurel ends up sending a riot squad to stop a disturbance at Starling National Bank, as she's the DA, since the DA is out of town. Felicity realizes that the Brother Eye virus was written by her. Roy and Ollie manage to calm things down at the bank, or at least disperse the crowd. Then Felicity sends Ollie and Roy after a potential lead, ex-boyfriend's, her college boyfriend's roommate. But it turns out he is not the guy. He pretty much turned himself around after college, and is now working at an accounting firm. Felicity and her mom talk, and during the said talk, Felicity realizes that her mother's visit was actually part of Brother Eye's plan, and they get kidnapped. And after the kidnapping, they find out that Felicity's old college boyfriend, who is not as dead as she thought he was, is behind the whole thing. He also intends for Felicity to help him hack a GPS system belonging to the NSA for money because of the bank hack. Felicity manages to get a message to Ollie, who shows up to save her, while Roy and Diggle stop the boyfriend's henchman. Felicity knocks out her ex-boyfriend herself, not because Ollie can't, but because she needed to. Laurel opens up to Ted about Sarah, and Ted basically tells her that now he knows how to train her. Felicity and her mom spend some quality time together as she called in sick to work right there in front of Roy, Ray, right in front of Ray, telling him flat out that she was calling in sick. Finally, the finale of the episode. Roy either dreams or remembers being the one who killed Sarah, by apparently throwing arrows at her. Wakes up suddenly, and apparently this is probably what has been causing him to have trouble sleeping of late. Alright, moving on to this week's episode of The Flash. Opens up at a bar. Barry's musing on friendship while there with Iris, Cisco, Caitlin, and Eddie. He soon discovers that he metabolizes alcohol too fast for it to affect him. Across town, a bombing happens, almost killing a window washer. Barry manages to save him, and in fact, by running up the side of the building. But he's seen by Iris, though he does the vibrating thing with his face so she can't see him. General Wade Eiling shows up and basically relieves Joe, Eddie, and Barry of all materials relating to the bombing, claiming that it involves a operative of theirs. However, Barry manages to reappropriate very quickly a file folder that he managed to find. And he manages to find the quote-unquote bomber, who's actually a metahuman that causes explosions by touch. And she promptly blows up Barry's suit because she touched it. Joe ends up telling Barry to back off on the streak, and Barry fails. However, Barry does save Bet, the metahuman, and brings her to Star Labs, where a tracker is discovered on her. While in costume, Barry has a talk with Iris to try and get her to stop blogging about him. Iris then basically informs that, at least at that point, the reason why she was blogging about him was basically because it seemed that Barry had lost his faith in the impossible. Back at Star Labs, Bet is told there is no way they can help her. They can't reverse the process. That they cannot, turn her back to a regular human. Barry tries to make a case for her joining the team and gets shot down, mainly because of what it is Bet does. Joe and Barry have another talk about Iris, which includes the fact that Joe has noticed that Barry does have feelings for Iris. And the only person who seems to not notice is Iris. Back at Star Labs, Professor Wells convinces Bet to kill General Eiling as a means of protecting her fellow metahumans. Barry manages to stop Bet from killing Eiling, but even though he is injured, he still manages to draw his sidearm and shoot Bet in the chest. As she's dying, she tries to tell Barry that it was Professor Wells that convinced her to do it, but she doesn't manage to get all that out. She kind of sputters Wells, and then she dies. But her body starts to glow, basically denoting that she's reaching critical mass, and Barry runs her out in the middle of the ocean, drops the body, and runs back, barely beating the explosion. Barry and Iris have yet another talk about her blog, and it does not go well at all, with Barry and Iris deciding that they'll probably just leave each other alone for a little while. Eiling and Wells have a talk about working together once again. Wells refuses, as he does not agree with Eiling's methods. A flashback to 5 years ago, we find out that we see Wells and Eiling working together on Grodd, a gorilla. Though apparently Eiling was not entirely humane in his treatment of Grodd. And Wells tells Grodd that he has much bigger things in store for him. What those bigger things are, we're sure to find out eventually. And that's where the episode ends. Moving on to this week's episode of Gotham. Starts off in what looks to be an abandoned office building. Two men fight each other, apparently to the death. In the morning, the loser is found by the GCPD with a bitten off thumb in his mouth. The Penguin, after stealing a brooch from basically mugging a well-to-do woman and stealing her brooch, Penguin goes to negotiate terms with Fish. The results are mixed at best. Penguin gives Fish the brooch. She pulls the clasp out and stabs Penguin in the hand with it, in fact. He takes the brooch, eventually gives it to his mother. Bruce goes back to school, albeit reluctantly. Bullock and Gordon talk to a black market doctor and learn some info about the man with the bitten off thumb before arresting said doctor. The cops are really not too happy with Gordon right now. It's believed partially because his being there reminds them all of how cowardly they were when Victor Zsasz showed up for Gordon. Speaking of Victor Zsasz, Barbara, it turns out, is still quite freaked about the incident with him, and in fact, at one point, does pull a gun on Gordon when he comes home late. Bruce briefly has a brief conversation with a fellow student named Tommy Elliott, who expresses a very distinct degree of interest about the death of Bruce's parents. Before Bruce walks away, very unsettled. Fish gives orders to her weapon concerning a ledger that belongs to Falcone, and also provides her with a means of making sure the girl is able to get the key to access said ledger. I say that three times fast. Bullock and Gordon look into Sionis financials, where a card of which fell out of the pocket of the man with the bitten off thumb at the black market doctor's place, and discover that part of the hiring process is apparently a fight amongst the top 3 applicants for whichever job. The winner getting, of course, the job. Gordon, after doing some digging through real estate records, Gordon manages to find the location for the fight that the fights are, and gets taken prisoner by Sionis. Bruce gets back at Tommy Elliott with Alfred's help. Quick aside is that Bruce and Tommy got into a bit of a fight after Tommy insulted Bruce's mother. And like I said, Bruce gets back at him. Gordon becomes the target of the latest Sionis fight, with Sionis saying that this time, instead of the 3 beating up on each other, they had to kill whichever one kills Gordon is hired and gets $1 million signing bonus. Gordon beats all 3 and then takes on Sionis himself, and Sionis ends up arrested. Fish's weapon tells Fish that she wants out, but first still delivers the info that Fish asked for, and then is also talked into staying on by Fish. Penguin, over the course of the latter half of the episode, interrogates, tortures, and eventually ends up killing his replacement within Fish's organization for info on Fish. At the end of the episode, Barbara decides to leave Gordon, partially because he kind of just hung up on her when he was searching for the location of the fights. And then Bruce asks Alfred to teach him how to fight, and Alfred happily accepts. The good episode. The illusion of the Sionis family having a fascination with masks is very cool. For those unaware, Roman Sionis is the alter ego of long-time Bat villain by the name of Black Mask. I would wager to guess that Richard Sionis, who was shown in the episode, is Roman's father. Alright, moving on to Scorpion. Alright. Walter gets in a street race with a rented Lamborghini and loses. Later on, the team looks over the footage of the race to try and figure out how the loss could be prevented a second time. The idea being that Walter intends to ask his opponent to double or nothing. The team is called to a murder scene and find an algorithm on a whiteboard. Upon trying to enter the home of a potential suspect, and the LAPD also tells them they're going to circle back and see about finding another way, a more legal way in. Walter enters on his own and gets shocked by a tripwire before meeting the writer of the algorithm, who explains it. That's a means of calculating hit pop music. And apparently, though, it was stolen from him. Toby and Paige accompany the writer of the algorithm to speak to a hip-hop record executive, and to basically also accuse him of stealing the algorithm itself. Afterwards, I might add that Toby acts as Peyton, the writer of the algorithm's lawyer, with Paige being his assistant. After they leave the building, however, their van is blown up by a shoddily installed car bomb. The bomber is eventually identified as being a member of a private security firm who is known for, they're known for working for a lot of people in the music business. Cade gets the name to the LAPD. However, the team themselves go to, well, first off, Walter is tasered, knocked out, and Peyton is drugged and kidnapped by the would-be bomber. And the intention being they're going to kill him. The team arrives, manages to distract the different record executive, not the hip hop representative executive spoke with earlier, but a different executive. And Toby ends up having to be the distraction while they get Peyton out. And, well, Toby almost gets dropped off of a balcony. But they manage to get Peyton out. And of course, the actual killer and the man who hired him are arrested. Now, also, a point during most of the episode is that Ralph and his father went to a baseball game together. And at first, Ralph just really wasn't into it. However, Walter suggests get Ralph a program, point out statistics, point out batting orders and whatnot, and talk to him about baseball from that perspective. Apparently, that's exactly what it took for Ralph to get into the game. And at the end of the episode, Walter tries double or nothing with the street race. I would presume, he won. Alright, moving on to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Skye and Coulson discuss the alien writing some more. Also, the intro has a man and woman in upstate New York coming back to the woman's house. The woman insists she knows the man from somewhere. Eventually, what it turns out, though, is it's the same man who we saw a few episodes back getting the alien writing tattooed on him. He unbuttons his shirt, reveals the tattooed writing. She sees it, and then eventually he kills her. While Skye and Coulson discuss the alien writing, May is tracking Ward in the air while Tripp sees him enter a bus station and check a locker. However, he does not engage because, as Ward shows him, he has A, C4 strapped to his stomach, and B, a dead man's switch. The murder victim is found with the alien writing carved into her on various points. Skye and Coulson investigate the scene and also manage to abscond with the body so they can autopsy it. Especially as they find out that the victim is a former S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who has died of cancer 5 years previously. While in Atlanta, Ward switches buses, first running into Morris on a bus to Dallas, but he switches buses and ends up on the same bus as Hunter, heading to Boston. In order to try and learn more about the Tahiti project, Coulson uses Raina's torture machine and finds out that the victim from earlier in the episode was actually a test subject of the Tahiti project, and that all half dozen agents who were test subjects went crazy and started doing the writing, and so they had their memories replaced and were given new identities and everything. In Boston, Ward makes it to a Hydra safe house, and he's promptly met by some of Whitehall's men. He offers one the opportunity to get close enough to Coulson to put a bullet through his head. Going through files on the other test subjects. It turns out that the fire in Miami, where the painting with the alien writing on the back was discovered, was the work of the murderer. Coulson goes to say the only remaining test subject, in fact, throws Sky in their little jail cell. Turns out, though, he got there after the killer, but not to the point where the killer had already struck. Of course, a fight breaks out between Coulson, the last two members. In Boston, May, Morse, Tripp, and Hunter go after Ward and see that he, along with most of Whitehall's men, though not his primary, his primary assistants, have gone. And in fact, the primary assistant is duct tape, has a roll of duct tape across his mouth, says for Coulson. Coulson, while almost being tortured by the killer, Coulson realizes what the alien writing actually is. It's not a map. It's not communication. It's a city, and wants a more using the base's holographic technology. They managed to make a representation of the city, and it seems that they could very well be Adelan, the home of the Inhumans. Ward eventually calls S.H.I.E.L.D. before going off, presumably to kill his brother. Talks to Sky a bit. And then also shaves off his beard, cuts his hair, and like I said, goes off to presumably kill his brother. And that's pretty much where the episode ended. Finally, Sleepy Hollow for this week. Episode begins with Ichabod and Katrina watching, of all things, The Bachelor, and talking about love, their views on love, before addressing Katrina's secrets. Abby pops in and informs the Cranes that she has put a trace on Henry's computer, as they hadn't heard from him in a week. Katrina also reveals to Abby she is absolutely enamored of reality TV. We then see Henry conducting a ritual and summoning a succubus who quickly feeds on a local youth. She then returns to Henry and basically takes the life force she drained out of the man at the club into a massive jar, which appears to be possibly nourishing something. The succubus ends up going after Holly, but he's saved by Ichabod and Abby, and he also, in all honesty, he actually helps a little bit as well. It's implied heavily that the secret desire in his heart is for Abby. Katrina has visions linking to Henry's plan, which reveal that the succubus is using the life energy that she collects to nurture Moloch, who was not sent back to purgatory as believed at the end of the last episode, but is rather stuck on the mortal plane, but just unable to take a physical form. After the failed attempt to have him born through Katrina. Let's see. Abby and Katrina find the heart of the succubus, as it turns out the way to kill a succubus is find their heart and destroy it. They destroy most of the heart, while Holly and Ichabod worry about destroying the physical part of the succubus. Once it's done, Katrina informs Abby that she plans to re-infiltrate Abraham and Henry's little group in the hopes of destroying Moloch once and for all. Katrina agrees and passes the information on to Ichabod, who is not entirely happy, but he still understands. That's where that ended. So that's really all I got for now. I'll be back on Saturday. As always, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. There's links to my social media sites down below, Facebook page and Twitter. And like I said, that's all I got for tonight. So as always, live long and rock hard.